Sounded Good is filled with opinions, and though these opinions may be shared with fervor and conviction, they remain in essence opinion only. What About Amiobi and J. Ray Gun do not represent PGA Tour 2K21, 2K Sports, TGC Tours, or any other company, group, or individual mentioned or insinuated. We're just two guys with too much time on our hands. Welcome to
Sounded Good.
All right, guys, welcome to episode 4 of Sounded Good, where we talk about all things TGC Tours, PGA Tour 2K21, and whatever else tickles our fancy. I'm What About Amiobi. Joining me is
J. Ray Gun, as always.
And today we have ourselves a special guest. He is a reviewer and a scheduler on the TGC Tours site and forums. Has the shortest name I've ever seen in any forum of any kind. Welcome, Q.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on.
We'll insert some applause and cheers here.
Yeah, we'll golf clap there for you.
Welcome, Q. You forgot to mention Wayne. He's actually one hell of a course designer as well.
He is that, yes. He is that. Thank you for agreeing to stop by with us here today, Q, and answer some questions that I know J. Ray and I have, but also a bunch of the community does too.
No problem. I'd love to answer some questions, kind of make the process more clear. It's kind of been my goal as a scheduler as well to make my thought processes kind of open and more available so people kind of understand what I'm doing.
Excellent. That's cool. What we're all about.
Absolutely.
Do you want to start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, Q? Kind of how you got involved in the game, whether this is your first involvement with the TGC, or with the TGC as it was, or with the PGA Tour series, and kind of how you got involved with TGC Tours?
Yeah, sure. So I'm also kind of an example, just like maybe of being someone who kind of showed up out of nowhere just earlier last year, and I guess disproves the kind of clique idea that basically, I started playing in late October, early November, and just was watching, actually found Jerry YouTube videos before I found Crazy Canuck videos, interestingly enough. So Jerry was actually my introduction to the game, surprisingly or not.
Yeah, that was about the time Jerry was making his name known out there.
Yeah, and then I switched to a lot of Crazy Canuck videos, and then slowly got involved in his YouTube, and basically got a course out where I found an interesting bug, I guess, in the game that allowed you to change tee orientation. There was another person on the forum at the time, he's since stopped, that basically found a different part of the same bug. We kind of collaborated, and I wrote a script and made a basic tutorial how to do it. And it kind of, that bug, that kind of weird niche thing of manipulating tees kind of became my thing. And it kind of propelled my course, which was, it's an okay course, my first course, but the manipulation on it really made it more well-known and kind of got my name out there. And basically from there, I just started being really active in the community and being kind of more of a positive force. I guess my advice to anyone trying to become more of a prominent figure in TGC is just not to be an asshole about it. It's just be a good person, and generally you'll fit right in.
Basic life advice, I'd say.
Did you listen to our last podcast? I feel like we said that.
Is that a don't of the do and don'ts?
It got in there somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, I participated in a design league back in December and actually won. I was the MJM of the time. I kind of came out of nowhere and won my first design league thing. It's been all downhill since, but that kind of also propelled my name on the map, got me into the World Cup. And at the time, I volunteered as a ranger. And if you don't know what a ranger role is in TGC Tours, it kind of allows it's like a really introductory volunteer role. Pretty much anyone, if they ask, can become a ranger. And it's basically you're given courses from schedulers, and your goal is to basically give as much feedback as possible to the scheduler of how the course plays under different wind conditions, under very fast greens. Basically allows the scheduler to do or be more efficient at his job without having to play the course like 50 times, basically. So Ranger was my way of getting into volunteering. And then I also, similar to Amebi, started reviewing courses outside of TGC and creating lists of like the top courses every month as Andre or Crazy Canuck stopped doing that. And it got recognized for being someone who plays probably almost as many courses as Amebi, but maybe not quite. And from
Amiobi.
Amiobi, sorry.
Amiobi.
I always think amoeba, sorry. That's an issue with me. But yeah. So to cut it basically a bit short, I got recognized as someone who plays a lot of courses, has a lot of reviewer knowledge, and I just asked to become a reviewer and was instated in basically. And then shortly afterwards, the former platinum scheduler stepped down out of his role because of computer issues. And I literally just got contacted out of the blue if I wanted the scheduling job. So it was a very rapid ascent, I guess. And this all happened in a couple months. So yeah.
And that first course that you put out with the team manipulation, that was Asylum, right?
That was the Bohemian Club.
The Bohemian Club. That's right.
Course.
That's right. That was the. Was that after Asylum or before?
That was before. That was my first course, quote unquote, and I got lucky enough to get it tour worthy, but that was mainly because I tinkered with it and got as much feedback as possible before releasing it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm pretty sure nowadays, actually interesting nowadays, I don't think it would be tour worthy by our new standards. So
for those that may not know, if you have just a quick and dirty explanation of what the team manipulation process is and like why you would use it or how you would use it.
Team manipulation, it's kind of just a way, normally in the designer, the back tees are always the back tees and the front tees are always the front tees. Just kind of like in real life golf, if you go out to a golf course, the red tees, let's say, are always the shortest tees on every single hole. Like you aren't playing the red tees at a golf course and then suddenly the red tees are 100 yards behind all the other tees on one of the random holes.
Right.
But essentially in the designer, the waypoint or the place where you aim your driver or whatever you're hitting off the tee, you can move the waypoint, and the way the tees update is they don't update when you move waypoints, they update to where the waypoint is. So you can set the waypoint in weird spots like behind the tees to trick the tees into thinking that they're further or closer to the green than they actually are.
Okay, so that allows you a lot more options off a tee or a way to play a hole or a course. Even if you play the black tees aren't always going to, if they're the back tees, they're not always going to be the longest tees.
Yeah, so it was actually used quite extensively by CLV recently. Probably uses it the best to kind of show off how it can be used. He did it for both Augusta and for Winged Foot, and both of them were to set up those two courses so that they would play identical to their real life equivalents, because each day the tees move corresponding to the pins. So in a lot of cases, Augusta will set up its par threes so that the tees match where the pin position is. So, for instance, a hole will play either 240 or 180 yards, depending on the day. So as a scheduler, or the way manipulation would help, is that it allows you to have these 4 sets of tees in any order you want, and they can each represent a different day of a 4-day golf tournament.
Yeah, that's cool, because that is one of the downsides of the designer, is that you can't like designate an area that is for the back tees and then have the tees be of different lengths throughout. It is kind of one of the shortcomings, that you can't designate an area and move that back and forth. So that is a cool thing that that you guys discovered, and then some people have kind of built upon it, and made it kind of a more, like, I see it a lot in some different courses out there. And it's a really cool thing, especially when you play a course in a society or in a tournament setting, and it just gives you a little different look. Even if it shaves just 20 yards off of a hole, it can give you an entirely different way of playing it.
So Q, how in the world did you find that? I mean, I can't imagine you're sitting there going, "Oh, geez, I wonder what happens if I stick a waypoint behind a tee." How did you guys find this?
So I actually made a forum post in TGC asking if I could rearrange the order of the tees, and got a very firm no back. And then I just literally started messing around with waypoints, seeing if there's any way to abuse it. Because I knew, for instance, I discovered that the waypoint is how the tee order is ordered, not the actual pin locations. If you notice on a scorecard in game versus the actual length of the holes don't match up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's because the waypoint determines how much it's cut off on dog legs, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I just started messing with the waypoints, and I suddenly noticed that my tees had reversed order, and just tried to replicate it.
And then you went back to the forum and gave them a firm, "Yes, I can actually."
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Cool. I'd like to get into a little bit of just the reviewer process, and from the point of view of the new designer who it's the first time they've submitted a course to TGC Tours, hoping to get it in the database. So they've submitted their course. What can they expect to have happen next?
So generally, when someone submits a course, I have a specific spot on TGC Tours, a part of the website only reviewers can see, and there's a long list. Every course that gets submitted is on that list, and every reviewer can see it and claim courses to review. So generally, if a new person submits a course using 2 TGC Tours, it'll show up probably within 30 minutes to an hour, but there's usually a queue of 20 to 10 courses already. We probably, in our peak back in December-ish, we're getting close to 30 courses a day almost at some points.
Wow.
But and had significantly less reviewers. Now we actually have a pretty large amount of volunteer reviewers, and the queue is pretty fast at the moment. You might get basically a notice, an email of the basic verdict of your course probably within a week or less nowadays.
And how does that verdict show up?
It's a simple email from the TGC Tours, and it'll pop up and say your course was approved or your course was not approved. And so generally, the email does not tell you if your course is approved or tour worthy, but it will tell you if your course was approved or not, and then you have to actually go on the website and see if your course was tour worthy.
Okay. And what are the differences between those three?
So to think about it, basically not approved courses have to have egregious flaws. The way we've arranged it now, and we've kind of tightened the definitions, we've actually had a lot of talking directly between all the reviewers to try and standardize this as much as possible. Not approved now specifically means an egregious flaw. So generally, if you get a not approved back on your course, there is a significant issue somewhere. And Ben has made, or B101 has made excellent YouTube videos describing exactly in detail what these things are. But the general categories are extreme sculpting issues, like you have lumps in the fairway that are 20 feet tall. You have impossible greens where you can't even put up slopes, or you have shapes that just make no sense, bunkers that are perfectly flat, things like that, like things that are just so unrealistic or so impossible to exist that you would play it, or it just wouldn't like have any value to play it in the game. That makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And then for approved, the concept is there basically. The course plays, as in you can finish all 18 holes and not be like 30 over, 40 over par after those 18 holes. And the general concept is there. The issue is we've really tightened what tour worthy means to being, can this course play on a specific tour? It doesn't necessarily mean a course is better than an approved course, but I generally say tour worthy courses have usually a shine or like a real quality to them that appeals to, I'd say, the majority of players, or appeal to like a larger audience than maybe an approved course has specific quirks or things that you might as a reviewer deem awkward, like 90-degree dog legs or more funky designs basically. Mm-hmm. But a tour worthy course specifically means I am reviewing this. I think this can fit. Like I think a Plat scheduler or a Kinetic scheduler or the CC scheduler looks at this course and goes, I want to put this on tour. So it's kind of a reviewer's idea of going, I'm giving this a tour-worthy designation because I believe this will fit on a specific tour in terms of difficulty. So there is a difficulty range in that. Mm-hmm. And it'll also play well over 4 days, because it has to play well from all 4 pins. It has to play well in a lot of varying conditions. It can't just play well in one, because you need 4 specific unique days on a tour-worthy course. And you want someone to want to play all 4 days. And that is probably the most important part. You want it to be so good that a player will actually be engaged all 4 days and won't be like bored or tired after the third.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like when a designer says, well, my course is designed for north wind, it plays for north wind, that's probably not the best thing for a tour course then.
Well, you could say as long as the other winds are still accounted for, like you could make the north wind day the big like moving day, or have it on the like pivotal Sunday round, as long as the other wind directions don't play absolutely horribly.
Yeah.
That's still fine to build it around mostly one wind. But it's pretty important, especially these days, to have a course that can work on most winds up to high winds. Don't worry about very high winds, just high winds.
Okay. Just give me a sec, Jay, right? My camera's funky again.
Uh-oh.
Come on, you bugger. I mean, it's still going to work, but as long as it's plugged in, it'll stay on. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, other than that, you guys covered the other details quite nicely in your previous podcasts.
I've actually
watched all of them, and I believe you covered the other topics of them pretty perfectly of what a tour-worthy course should be. For instance, the idea of having like going back to tour worthies being worth playing 4 times in a row. Mm-hmm. You don't want like a center line hazard 7 or 8 times on one golf course, because you have to realize that means they have to deal with that repeating pattern 4 times. So if there's 8 centerline hazards, that means you're 20 centerline hazards played over 4 days. So any like repetition or anything that you do on a course like that, just realize it gets even more compounded when you play it multiple times.
Awesome.
I've always looked at it, from the not approved to me has always been fairly easy to establish. I mean, when you're talking about egregious faults, and if somebody, and you see this a lot, and we're going to get into it in a little bit, but when somebody really comes back and fights against their not approved status, especially today after that not approved, has really been boiled down to some egregious flaws in a course, that to me tells me that they're not really understanding what TGC Tours is trying to do with their review process. I think most of the time, if you're submitting a course, for most designers, it has a very good chance of getting approved because you're submitting it because you've put in the work, you've checked out the forums, you know what to do, and maybe you're still working through using the tools, but you understand, okay, I can't have totally flat bunkers. I can't have a 3-foot rise on a 187 green and expect this to get approved. So those aside, the difference I've seen between approved and tour worthy is like literally approved courses can be your local country clubs, your local municipals, that are good courses. They're fun. You go out and you play them and you have fun on the weekends, but they will never host a PGA Tour. They're too short. They're not challenging enough. There's different things in real life that may not translate to the game, but this is kind of where I'm putting it here. And then your tour worthy courses are those that, like, literally your Pebble Beaches, your Augustas, your TPC courses, the ones that are built with a 4-day large professional tournament in mind, where, just like you're saying, the player is engaged for 4 days. They're not complaining about a specific element of the course across 4 days. Maybe there's a day where the wind plays directly into them for the majority of the day, but that's just, that happens in real life. And so, but it doesn't mean that the course itself was bad. And so there's a big difference, even though you look at a golf course and you're like, okay, I got 18 holes, they got 18 holes. I got, blah, 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 they got blah, blah. There is a huge difference in that tour-worthy tier that I don't think a lot of people maybe at this point can see just yet.
Well, and for me, I don't know if I would look at the PGA Tour personally, because I think that the PGA Tour courses require so much infrastructure around them. And they require things like being close to an airport, so it's easy for players and that kind of jazz. I'd be looking more at like state amateur courses, provincial amateur courses, high level like AJGA kind of stuff, important tournaments, but not ones that are needing to have 40,000 people there on site. I think that might be it. For people out there, because you look at a lot of the PGA Tour courses, I would argue a bunch of them aren't that great. The one I know best is Glen Abbey, because I'm, living in southwestern Ontario. It's just up the road for me. It's not a bad course, but it was created, let me put it this way. It's not the best course in Canada, that's for sure, but it's hosted the Canadian Open the most times. The reason is simple. It's in Toronto, a suburb of Toronto. It was designed with the purpose of hosting the Canadian Open, so it's got the kind of stadium aspect to it. It's got the ability to have all the infrastructure. When you look at more of that kind of state amateur, maybe even national amateur course, you have that same need for the quality of course, but you're not worrying about as much about the infrastructure, because you're not having many people show up. So just we don't disagree enough, J-Ray. So I thought episode 4 might be a good time to start.
Hey. So Q, as a reviewer, you said you volunteered, kind of asked to be a reviewer. What do you think qualifies you personally to, review a stranger's course and offer a emphatic judgment on there?
So a lot of it has to do with Well, for one thing, I've watched all the videos that Crazy Canuck and B101 have put out regarding the direct idea of what a actual tour worthy course is, and I have also released tour worthy, and not just tour worthy courses, but courses that people have directly, um, basically praised. To say it lightly, Asylum was pretty well received. And on top of that, I have, I guess, the ability to not be too, I guess the phrase goes back to not being too much of an asshole about things. I'm pretty good at PR side of things, of being friendly and trying to be cordial with people when reviewing their courses. Uh, at least not yet. I'm yet to be jaded by this whole experience, but in general, what I felt qualified me and what I think we look for in reviewers is someone who's has really good eye at detail and at picking apart like what small things are going on in the course while they're playing it, similar to how Amiobi does his videos. He goes through and very meticulously kind of looks at each like shot he's hitting and how it could have turned out, and basically just compares it to either real life course architecture, real life courses design, and kind of basically can break it down and run it by just a pretty simple list of like check marks and ideas, basic check marks too. So in terms of reviewing, I don't think it requires specifically a very high bar to hit, because I actually believe in general as a reviewer for TGC, we have such a good list of guidelines and ideas to follow that as simple as it is for someone to look up that huge video that B101 put out, it's very simple for a reviewer to not only base it off those guidelines, but also double check. We have an extensive reviewer forum where people can make sure they're on the same page with everyone else. So instead of really building myself up and saying like I'm this amazing person and that's why I'm a good reviewer, I'm more tearing it down and saying reviewing, if you can, settle on a standard across multiple people, actually is something that can be learned rather easily. And I think that anyone can become a reviewer if they have that eye for detail.
That eye for detail something that could be developed, or does that require certain kind of background knowledge, do you think?
It's hard to say. In outside of this game, I am kind of a course architecture nerd. I mean, I used to live next to Bandon and obsess over Tom Doak and like Corin Crenshaw and other like pretty famous architects, at least among people obsessed with like really beautiful golf courses. But in terms of like actual background, I don't believe you need to have a very strong background in golf itself, but that eye for detail maybe can be developed from multiple different hobbies, either from art, because a lot of our reviewers have kind of an artistic background, or just there's, I guess, video games in general also can cause you to be kind of meticulous over time. I'd say it's a learned skill. Yeah.
Would you say that most of the volunteer reviewers are also fairly active designers?
No, not at all. We have several reviewers who aren't active designers or are more schedulers. So most of our schedulers are reviewers too. And then on top of that, a couple of our reviewers, I don't believe have released courses in PGA 2K21 either. So there's a mix of people in our group. It's not just designers, but we've basically come together to create one standard that we can all follow.
Okay. And how many reviewers are there now? Do you know off the top of your head?
I have to say it has to be close to 20 to 30 now, but
Wow.
probably 5 to 8 really active ones, and then the rest will review like maybe one a week.
As a, let's say I wanted to be a reviewer, but I come in and I kind of have my own, viewpoints, my own personal preferences in terms of what makes a good course or what I think should be on tour. How important is it for reviewers to kind of assimilate to that standardized review process? And how often do you kind of have to look past your own personal preference in order to more match up with what the group think would be on a certain course?
I'd say there's actually a bit of wiggle room as a reviewer over bringing in your own ideas. But the idea is that you would be established first, and you would at least conform initially to the standards that we're trying to put out and suggest or add additions. So a lot of the actual things have changed about how we've reviewed courses have been based on suggestions from newer reviewers. I'm a newer reviewer myself, so that kind of added to it. Like, we collectively kind of updated Tour Worthy based off of the kind of new ideas that got put forth. But yeah, I'd say it goes back to one of your older podcast talks where you're talking about people coming into the community with this like swagger about them and this strong ego. And that's just not how you establish yourself in the community in general. You want to first be agreeable and be understanding. And then as you become more respected, then you can put forth your opinions, because then your opinions will also be respected once you are.
Yeah, that makes sense. We kind of preach that ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a softball for you. So let's assume I actually designed more than half of a hole. I got all 18 done, and I submitted it. And shockingly, in my case, my course wasn't accepted. What should I do next? What are some suggestions you would have for that designer whose course wasn't accepted?
Well, as you pointed out in previous videos, the not approved kind of forum section, which is probably the first reference point that people are told to go to when their course isn't approved, isn't really a comprehensive explanation for how a course was not approved or was. So generally, the keywords used in that short sentence, like sculpting issues, any of those like surfacing errors kind of things, are reference to that Ben video. So it's kind of ridiculous how much we actually preach that one video that Ben and Andre specifically made for this, but that how to get your course approved video by Ben is literally the explanation for all that jargon we're throwing at you in the not approved video. Mm-hmm. Like what we mean by surfacing, what we mean by those small keywords, because if we were to write out that long paragraph explaining why your course wasn't approved, it would be pretty much a copy paste every time for a lot of these not approved courses. So Ben's video is this really comprehensive explanation of every little thing we mean when we say surfacing or sculpting issues. It also just really goes into detail about at least basic course strategy too. So that would be my very first thing I go to, is watch that video. It's really the standard we try to follow as well. It's pretty out there, pretty transparent. And also, Andre or Crazy Canuck put out in the completed courses forums the guidelines, the actual page with individual like do's and don'ts as well. And that also should be something that anyone who wants to get into this immediately looks at. And then from there, it's just tutorial videos on YouTube. There's such a swath of free, amazing content. And I used it too. It's the entire reason I was able to even make a decent course for my first course, was because everyone made these excellent tutorials. So it's all there at your fingertips if you're willing to look for it and put in a little extra effort. So I guess I would just say not approved to the bend video to tutorials.
Okay. And so I did that, and I don't get it. I don't understand why my course wasn't approved. How do I get feedback specifically about my course?
So there's a couple places in the forums that will give you some feedback, but it's actually pretty decently hard to get really, really solid feedback on a course. That's why it's really lovely that we have a third party person who can do it that's outside of TGC, because if your course wasn't approved and you're suddenly not trusting TGC Tours, it's nice that there are people like you, for instance, that you could go to and ask to review a course as well. Because one, you're not associated with TGC Tours, so your opinion is almost like a separate party. But also there's Discords and under construction part of the designer forum, which is for courses in progress. Generally posting pictures there, posting betas does actually get some feedback. Quality of the feedback varies, but in terms of getting direct feedback, there aren't too many options other than just putting yourself out there and just realizing that when a course isn't approved, just moving on and making another until you get more and more used to the designer.
Q, how frustrated do you get that there's guys out there like Wayne that are submitting their courses and they're not getting approved, and it seems to be it's the same reasons over and over that can obviously, if not be mitigated, at least remove the wonder about why your course was not approved if they would have watched that video that B101 and Crazy Canuck put out, or if they would have read the guidelines. Like how frustrating is it that maybe it seems like a lot of that is being ignored before people really submit their courses?
I've see it a lot. There are people who continually submit to the debate database and continually get their courses not approved. Personally, I don't have too much of an issue with it. The onus is on them to improve, after all. But in terms of volunteering, it is a lot of extra time. Every course does take time to review. So I guess in terms of time consumption, it can get annoying, but it's part of the volunteering process. A huge chunk of the courses that we play are not approved. And it's kind of something that as a volunteer, you kind of expect, if that makes sense. You don't expect a volunteer job to be easy or just because you're not getting paid for it. You do it because you get some enjoyment out of it. And even if it's frustrating, it's not something that sticks, I guess, if that makes sense.
Now you said a huge chunk of the courses that you play are not approved, but the numbers that I've gotten from the TGC guys have said that it's just about 20% of courses that are submitted that are not approved. Is that jive with what you're seeing, or are you maybe a little more stringent on it, in your personal reviews?
Well, it's kind of interesting because, yes, it's only about 20%. Mm-hmm. I can kind of verify that it's not as many as it used to be. But in general, when I'm reviewing courses, I stay away from names that I recognize. So I basically never really review courses by people who have had tour-worthy courses in the past. I kind of focus on courses made by newer people. It's kind of what I prefer reviewing for the most part. So if that makes sense, reviewers can kind of choose which courses they want to review in the queue list. Some people will sometimes jump ahead and instantly review a course if they recognize the reviewer and already they recognize the player or designer, and they immediately, like, they personally gave feedback to the person in the past. They want to see how they've improved. But it's more like each reviewer kind of has a focus. I like focusing on newer courses because, as you said, not approved courses are generally easier courses to review at the same time. So it, as I said, it's kind of a balance, because usually now that not approved is egregious, it doesn't take as long to review it as a tour-worthy course. Like if you're like really on the cusp of, is this an approved or tour-worthy course?
Sure.
So in that regard, not approved courses don't take as much time to review. So yeah, it's just kind of a balance. And as I said, I kind of focus on that 20%. So
Is there more frustration for you though when a person submits a course, it's not approved, and then they basically argue about it in the not approved thread?
No, I think, I mean, I personally don't really enjoy looking at that thread out. I just kind of post and get out. I know some people have a little bit of fun in that thread, reading through it at times. But I mean, because I posted, and because as a reviewer you put your name out there, I do say you can get targeted directly, and I was directly targeted by someone in the past that made a YouTube video and targeted one of my courses as a retaliatory measure, basically. So I know it doesn't feel good necessarily to get those people arguing in that regard, but at the same time, it's not something I really pay attention to. And I think that's probably another thing I'd recommend being good as a reviewer, is not necessarily having thick skin, because I don't think you need to have thick skin to be a reviewer, but instead just be good at ignoring specific things or not reading things that might hurt your mental state, basically. So just avoiding when people have personal attacks because their course wasn't approved.
Yeah.
And understanding, they have an attachment to their own course, like trying to understand why they're having such a reaction.
Yeah, hey Q, J Ray Gun here. I submitted a course a while back, and it was a contest course, and I spent a lot of hours on it. Okay, and you apparently reviewed it, Doghead Ranch. I don't know if you remember it or not. You apparently reviewed it, and all you gave me was a one-line response that said, "Not approved. We're not accepting 9-hole courses at this time." And I'm like, what? Because where do I find that information? I didn't know that. I thought it was a great course. It was a contest course. Like, what's going on with that, Q? That's for real, Q.
Yeah, luckily, at least for that section, people are generally understanding, like, oh, we don't accept par 3 courses or 9-hole courses, because that's something I really try to clarify to people about TGC, is these are courses for people to play. They're not necessarily the best courses. I'd say in general, they're probably some of the best courses in the game that are tour worthy, but there are plenty of approved or par 3 courses or 9-hole courses in the game that are amazing, that aren't in the database simply because we can't use them on tour. And I just always stress that to people, is that this is specifically for an event, like a structure for a society, that we're looking for this set of courses. It's not a direct knock on your course if you don't get in the database. It's just a knock on, we're not looking for this specific kind of course.
That makes sense.
Okay, so like you're not basically so TGC Tours policy is not saying we decide whether your course is good or not. It's more we decide whether or not this course would work on the tours that we run.
Yeah, it's purely a way for people to say, hey, would you use this for your society? And then we can say yes or no. It's very much we would love to use courses that are good, and occasionally there'd be people who submit courses that don't ever submit to the database, and we'll have people specifically reach out to them as well. There's been cases like that in the past, but it's mainly just a database for us to use for events. It's, as much as I'd like to say that all the best courses are in our database, it's not necessarily true.
Yeah,
Right.
that I think that's a good point because I think a lot of people, um, probably more so maybe prior to PGA Tour 2K coming out, but back when it was called the Golf Club, and you were getting TGC 19 and TGC 2 and all that, and then you had TGC Tours. I think it was very easy to associate TGC Tours, the website, with TGC, the golf game, and draw a parallel to a relationship there. And I don't think people understand, or a lot of people do, but I think there's some people that don't quite get that TGC Tours is its own thing, separate and unrelated to the game itself. It would be like the Barstool Sports Society, the pleated pants of Jack Wagon Society, Victory Lane Sports, Dam Society. They're run independently by their own, entities, and so. But I think people see that TGC and they think, okay, I'm submitting my course and I'm submitting it to the game, right? I'm submitting it to the people that run the game, and so when I'm not approved, maybe they think it hits a little harder, or they're like, why are these people gatekeeping my course from the game? But I think when you put it in perspective, in that, look, we're not saying your course is good or not. We're saying, like, do we want to use this course in our personal independent society events? I think that's kind of maybe a better way to look at it for designers when they submit. Is like, I'm not submitting for a, hey, this is good, clap on the back. I'm submitting to see if, hey, would my course be good to host a 4-day tournament on this society?
And on top of that, also, I think I really do understand the frustrations there too, because I think there's a huge issue finding courses in the game itself. 2K21 simply doesn't have a good course search function to actually find courses. Mm-hmm. So the issue is there isn't really another database or another way to find courses in the game other than TGC Tours. So a lot of people see our database, the TGC Tours database, as the only way to get their course recognized. And it is kind of a shame that, and I hope that future games will fix this issue, but that there isn't a better system built into the game already for searching and finding people's courses.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure, yeah. Let me just throw your scheduling hat on here for a sec. So you schedule for the Platinum Tour, right?
Yes.
What are the things, like, how do you decide which courses you're going to have on that tour, in that society?
So Platinum is a very separate and interesting beast from literally every other group of schedules. And actually, I think a lot of the reason I ended up getting the Plat scheduler position is because it's not really a sought-after job. It's probably the most thankless of all the scheduling positions in terms of kind of unruliness, I guess you could say, amongst the Platinum players. But in terms of choosing courses for them, I really don't have as much wiggle room as other schedulers would. I have to have a course that can actually challenge literally the best players in the game. And that's almost impossible, and also challenge them in a way that isn't just completely unfair. So when I'm looking at courses, I have an incredibly small pool of courses that fit that criteria, that both are challenging and what I consider like challenging in a fair way. Like if I were to put it on very fast settings, very high winds, it still would play in a way that wouldn't just be the most frustrating experience imaginable. So when I'm scheduling for courses, just from a strategy difficulty level, I have a very small subset of courses I can look at. And also, if you're submitting a course to the database, if you check off the little icon that says your course is hard when you pick up the difficulty, that generally means I'm playing it, because I have to look and scour the entire database just to find courses that I consider hard enough for people to play.
Do you have many rangers helping you, or is that another position people don't really want that much? Or difficult because of how good you need to be, maybe?
The Rangers are workhorses for sure. The people who volunteer Rangers are literally some of the greatest people. Like I just constantly thank them for every course I send at them. And a lot of the times, I mean, we have Rangers of every skill level. We have platinum all the way to people who just play on pro settings in the Rangers. And I'll throw a course out and say, hey, try it at these conditions. Tell me if it's hard enough. And sometimes I'll get a Ranger who comes back to me and says, no, this course isn't going to play hard enough. And the players specifically seem to really despise when courses are too easy. So that is one of the things I most try to avoid.
Is that like your most common complaint from Plat? That it's too easy? Or what are some of the common ones you get?
Too easy, too hard.
Oh, that's easy.
Not a realistic course. I think the big three are either too easy, too hard, or not realistic.
And are those? Sorry.
Yeah, there's just so many different opinions of what people would like what platinum should be. And as a scheduler, I really try to be open about trying to accommodate and try to make each week play differently. So I'll have really hard weeks and breather weeks, and weeks that just slap you in the face, like an American Open coming up. So
yeah. And do you find that with the Platinum Tour, like when I had my brief foray up there, got my nosebleed and came back down, it seemed like there was a very large gap in skill from number 1 to like number 100, or maybe even not that far. Is that more challenging too as a result?
Yeah, the top 10 to 20 players in Plat generally seem to have a separate opinion from the bottom half of Plat. Especially players, and I really try to go in and watch as many platinum streamers as I can catch while I'm awake, of course, and generally ask them directly for feedback. And a lot of times I'll get like Steve Sloan or people telling me directly like, hey, I would really like you to schedule a course that really does challenge me, like one that's really, really challenging. And sometimes I'll get at least players that used to play a lot on the Plat level saying like, I want a course that literally makes me barely break par. And I'm like, but the lower half of platinum, if I were to do that, would be up in flames, because if the top 10 players are trying to break par, it's a mess. And also there is no course out there that I think would reach our guidelines to get into the database in the first place that are that hard. And like, if anything is harder than black salt in general, I think it generally wouldn't make our database.
Yeah, I was gonna say quickly. I mean, it would take just a designer that obviously had a mastery of the tools available to them, a mastery of course design theory in terms of strategy and but also realism to really offer a course that would challenge the upper tier of the platinum players enough that they want, while also fitting into your the TGC guidelines and offering realism. I mean, you're not going to have a green that's 5 yards wide, or up on a slope that's 40 feet tall that a ball's not going to stay on. Those are the fantasy type courses that you see that are not accepted into the database for obvious reasons. Do you think that there is a point where some players they're too good for the game? I mean, there's going to be players that are just too good to be challenged, and there's not a realistic way to challenge them anymore.
Yeah, there's a point where if you make a course unfair enough, it makes it so every shot has to be absolutely perfect. So in a ways, when you make a course more difficult, if someone's perfect, like playing perfect shots every time, the only people who feel the difficulty are the people who are mishitting, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For instance, Love Scud is a great example of a top plat player, and he shot, I think, 67 under in CC this last week in the CC Society.
Yeah, he did.
And I'm pretty certain when watching him, his whole proximity, like every approach shot, the ball is going within 10 feet of the hole. So when I'm looking for courses, a lot of the time, what I'm looking for in difficulty is how hard is it within the 10-foot vicinity of the pin? Because that's one of the easiest ways to make a course hard for plat, is to make the green slopes really severe in that 10-foot radius around the pin. And at that point, it almost becomes putting being 90% of the difficulty of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, because these guys have more or less broken the game because they're so good at it.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible to watch, and it has completely changed how I design courses as well, because the way risk reward is flipped on its head there is just so dramatic, and I think it's similarly reflected in the PGA Tour in real life. The courses that are now being built for PGA events are just so dramatically more penal than any course you'd ever play, and a lot of the times people wouldn't even consider a lot of the PGA Tour's courses to be top courses anymore, because they're just a mess of extremely penal, tight corridors and ridiculous greens.
Right.
Have you watched any of the or seen any of the LPGA tournament that's going on at what is
Olympic.
it? Olympic, yeah.
Club.
Olympic Club, yeah.
So I actually used to live in San Francisco. My wife went to SF State, which is literally right across the street from Harding Park and that whole venue, and it's just crazy. Those courses are all obscenely narrow.
Yeah,
and it kind of represents everything I see in plat. It's actually really interesting how plat so closely mirrors the PGA Tour in that regard, and that's why it feels like a lot of the time, and this is also for benefit because plat players can be so mean about the courses that are scheduled. I generally have to rely on really experienced designers' courses in order to challenge them, because the only other thing that I can really find is accidental difficulty, which is generally not something you want.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just looking at the leaderboard for it's the U.S. Women's Open right now at the Olympic Club. The leader's 6 under, so I mean there's 11 players are under par. But I mean Olympic, I remember it from when it's hosted the Men's Open. It's no joke.
And I watched a little bit of it the other day, and I mean those fairways. I watched 18, and those fairways were 27 yards wide.
Yeah.
little greens perched up on a hill with just surrounding bunkers, like circling the green. I
That'd be
wouldn't want to take a
rough.
shot into it. Yeah,
No.
rough that's 4 inches tall and no first cut. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Speaking about Black Salt Valley, and you mentioned the American Open's coming up, what, in a couple weeks, I imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you expecting to see there? I mean, it will be mostly Platinum Tour players. There'll be the odd non-Platinum Tour who's gotten one of the qualifiers. Are you looking forward to kind of the comments about that? Are you a little bit maybe concerned about what might come out, or are you just like it's our version of the U.S. Open? Have at it, boys.
So this is really, it's actually really fun for me to schedule this because so many players have been clamoring for a course this difficult for so long. And I feel the US Open equivalent of courses for TGC Tours is the one like venue that really allows me to just make as hard of a course as humanly possible. And at the same time, Black Salt is so hard that I had to manipulate the tees just to make it playable in certain wind conditions. Because if you look at Black Salt's layout, it has 500 plus par fours
Mm-hmm.
all over the place in every wind direction. So there's
Mm-hmm.
not a single wind direction I could schedule at high winds without one of them becoming unreachable. So I had to, Ben actually was nice enough to allow me to manipulate the tees for that course so that I could actually have working high winds on it. So it's kind of contradictory, but you get to a point where the course is so hard that winds don't work anymore. And you really need those winds to make a course hard.
Yeah, I played it on stream this week, and he got me to play it in the high winds, and I think it was the green tees. It's I mean, if that's not a test, there isn't going to be one because it's playable. Like it's not at all unfair. But you miss your landing spot by that 10 feet you're talking about, and your ball might stop rolling sometime tomorrow.
Yeah, and the thing is I still expect the cuts to probably there's still a chance the cut could be at 10 under. That's
Yeah,
how ridiculous plat players are.
yeah,
If I can break par on that course, and I think I saw you broke par there too,
yeah, yeah, I
plat
did.
players are going to, I think there's going to be, and I think at least one of the top 10 players is going to shoot in the 50s at Black Salt, and it's just going to be so incredible to watch.
That's
It's
nuts.
literally going to be a show.
But
And
then the bottom
yeah,
end of the field is going to get their heads kicked in, aren't they?
I expect it, and that's why I'm saying this is the one venue that allows me to say, "Hey, this is a U.S. Open. You should expect your head to get kicked in at this."
Right.
Not every course is going to be this hard.
And I imagine this will really show the difference in skill between that top 10 or 20 you were talking about and basically everybody else.
Yeah, but at the same time, with really hard courses, there's a degree of luck there
Yeah.
as well. There's the chance that someone can shoot a really, really good one-off round and make a huge run at it. And a lot of the times, I have an actual spreadsheet with all the statistics on Plat. One of the other schedulers, the elite schedulers, is amazing and keeps this huge detailed spreadsheet of all the events statistics throughout the year, so we can like create a consistent difficulty set or guideline that we want to follow. And in terms of the harder courses, it actually ends up having more unique winners than when the course is easy.
Hmm.
Steve Sloan has won at almost every single quote unquote easy plat venue this year, pretty much. If that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
just,
Makes
yeah,
absolute sense.
the difficulty allows different people to win almost.
Do you think that there's any validity in the complaints that I see from people who see a score from the Love Scuds of the world, the Sloaners of the world, and say this is ridiculous, like this is totally unrealistic? Is it valid because yes, a minus 67 on a 4-day round is ridiculously unrealistic. But then at the same time, it's like there are players in this game that have found a way, either through just their thumb-eye coordination, whatever, the way that they can judge the wind, judge the greens, judge everything. They are so meticulous about it that they have found a way to play this game where they can get scores like that, and just the other people, like myself included, are just either unable or unwilling to put in that kind of effort to get to that level. Do you feel like we need to either design or schedule down to that, maybe not lowest common denominator, but average common denominator? Or do we need to keep the skill level to challenge those upper tiers more?
It's interesting because, yeah, that's why I say Plaid is just such a different beast. But it also really shows the disjoint between real life golf and this game's golf. And
Yeah.
I'd say majority of the time, and this kind of goes, and I'll just lightly say this goes back to the Jerry idea, someone who has really huge amounts of real life golf experience will look at most of the golf courses in our database and in this game and say, these are for real life. If I tried to play this wouldn't be fun for me as an amateur golfer. Our golf courses in this game are so much harder than their real life counterparts that if I were to schedule, let's say, Torrey Pines, the US Open venue for this year on Platinum, they would still shoot in the 60s, 70s. The top score would probably be in the 60s easily. So it really shows the difference in how much more difficult the courses have to be in order to challenge players than real life golf courses are.
Yeah,
And it's partially because this game's trying to simulate being a pro. But if you're a pro at the pro controls, then you're a double pro, basically.
Well, I just looked up right now. There was two real courses that were played on Platt this year that were off the top of my head. One was Scottsdale, and the other was Sawgrass. Sawgrass, Bloner managed to struggle around in 61 under, and I think the other one was in the 50s. But I think with the people that are complaining that this isn't realistic, that these scores are crazy, and 61 under is crazy. Let's just get that out of the way. But I think if you actually think about what would need to happen to make the scores be more quote unquote realistic, I don't think anybody would enjoy playing that game. Because for one, a 4-foot putt would actually be difficult like it is in real life, or a 6-foot putt. Like anything inside 10 feet in this game, you're expecting to make it and upset if you don't. If putting was more realistic like it would be in real life, a lot of people would hate that. It would be so just dull and boring and infuriating that you're not making putts, right? For us, it's like 20 feet maybe. We're like, I haven't made any putts all day, but it's because you haven't made any 20-footers. And so I think people that are complaining about these crazy scores, I think they need to take that step back and realize it's almost like if you took a robot and took them out onto the golf course, the best players, that's basically what they're doing. They're that good at moving the stick up and down with the tempo that they're hitting perfect shots all the time, and not even PGA Tour players do that.
Yeah, as much as you can code in realism, in terms of things like a green slope or a wind or ball flight, you cannot code or account for the human element of the game, the pressure that one feels on the 17 at TPC Sawgrass, when you have a 1-shot lead and you're trying to close this out. You can't code that kind of pressure in. You can't code in something like the yips on putts.
I just have those.
Yeah, or when
in the game though.
And there's times, I mean, you look at a player like Jordan Spieth, who had a run of just great years, and then they just sort of lose a little bit. And Tiger went through the same thing when he's trying to rework his swing. And there's times when there's just some players, they just lose control of their drives. right? And so like a string of 5 or 6 holes, I mean, their drives are spraying left, spraying right, and you can't code that in because what that requires is an element of randomness. And if there's one thing I think that golf game players hate, whether you're a top player or a bottom player, is that idea that anything that happens on this course is outside of my control, which is one of the things that I think why the red fast changes got such a blowback. Even though I think people said they wanted them, I don't think they wanted them in the way that they got them, because while it's not random, it can feel random at times because of the way your actions, can manipulate the ball. It feels so far away from what your intentions were that it's almost random. You can't code that in. So those top players, they're never going to feel the pressure, unless you're sitting there blowing in their ear while they're trying to make a 10-foot putt. And even then, I'm not sure Sloaner would be affected or not.
No, he'd be fine. I mean, I genuinely do have the yips when I putt. I just have a
I do too.
shaky thumb. And then I play my competitive rounds on stream, and so I'm getting chirped by 20, 30, 40 guys at times. But I like that better. So sorry, you had a good question, Jay Ray. Go ahead. There was one you were gonna go digging.
Well, which one?
The one about the story.
Oh yeah. I figured.
Yeah.
Well, we've been going at this for a little longer than an hour now, so kind of closing it up with a couple of close-up questions. I wondered, Q, if you had any stories from the reviewer's side of things when it comes to comments coming back from unapproved designers. I mean, you don't have to go into detail in terms of like who the designer was or what the courses is, but like, kind of giving a peek behind the curtain of what these volunteers have to go through sometimes in terms of what they're getting back from maybe miffed or jaded designers.
Well, I'll not name any specific names, but there have been examples in the past where I can even say for myself, there's a message section on TGC. People can send me direct messages, and they have. People have been very much harassed. And I guess you can say that some of our reviewers do react sometimes pretty harshly to people because there's just the point where we've received so much negative messages, so many direct things that people probably outside won't even notice. But as reviewers, we kind of share them. That our only response really is to try to make a joke out of them. Sometimes that's the best coping mechanism, is to try and figure out how to spin it into something that's funny that we can kind of share with each other. In terms of behind the scenes with reviewers doing with not approved courses, a lot of times actually a reviewer, if he gets a lot of that knockback for not approving a course, or even just approving instead of tour worthing, he'll actually ask other reviewers to double check the course. A lot of the times when a course is approved, it isn't just one reviewer looking at it anymore. A lot of the times now in the reviewer forums, because we have enough reviewers to do it, there's sometimes consensuses that are made where multiple reviewers are reviewing the same course now. So there's quite a few courses that were really, really on the cusp of that tour worthy approved recently, where it didn't feel good marking them as approved, but we got group consensuses behind it, and we really tried to make sure that a lot of the reviewers agreed on the same point that it was either approved or tour worthy. Because as we've tightened up the tour worthy thing, especially since there's now 200 to 300 tour worthy courses that have never been scheduled, we have more tour worthy courses. Well, everyone except Platinum has more tour worthy courses than they could deal with. This tightening up has really made it hard because there's so much doubt that can be built up over time from reviewing courses and getting negative feedback on your reviews that we now have a kind of behind the scenes network just for reviewers where we kind of, if we have doubts, we just immediately ask the forum, like, hey, can you look at this course for me as well and make sure? And usually be like, we won't tell you what our verdict is, so you won't be influenced by my opinion, kind of deal, and then come to a consensus. So there's a lot more of that behind the scenes than I think people see. And I hope it's at least reassuring to know that a lot of the times, if any of us have a doubt about a course, that we ask first. We don't just make a decision a lot of the times if we're completely uncertain what if our opinion is affecting whether a course is being approved or not too much.
I was going to ask, is there a sort of review process for the reviewers? I mean, is there anyone that reviews the reviewers in order to make sure that courses that are being approved are meeting the consensus standards, or is there a kind of a reviewer that's gone rogue and maybe they're not approving courses that should be approved, or anything like that, so that maybe it adds a little more reassurance to some people that, hey, it's not just Q out there making Q decisions. There are people. I know that like Canuck is the head reviewer, and even though he's a busy guy involved with a lot of things, I didn't know if there's someone kind of checking in on the review process and making sure that it matches what TGC is putting out there.
Well, we've made it a lot more open, especially since we changed the guidelines to be more strict about in the forums also talking to people when they review something and we don't agree. Now a lot of reviewers will post like, hey, you reviewed that course as tour worthy and I didn't believe it deserved that. And then the reviewer will break down their thought process, and then generally the problem is resolved. We've just gotten so much better at communicating with one another, and I think this is the best review team in my short tenure I've ever experienced. Everyone's super open about their thoughts to each other. So in terms of that, there is a head reviewer that, of course, everyone kind of coincides with. Like, if we agree basically with Ben, what Ben or what Matt kind of have deliberations wise on what a tour worthy course should be, but we also can resolve without them, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But in general, in terms of checking it, we're just really good at having conversations when we think a course is either tour worthy when it doesn't need to be, which in all honesty, in my opinion, isn't a really big egregious thing. If that happens, if a course accidentally gets tour worthy, it's not going to hurt anyone. But nonetheless, having that standard really clamped up so everyone agrees that a course deserves it or not does make the standards like just even that more set in stone, that people can agree on things. But yeah, we're just really good at calling each other out at this point.
That's good.
I mean, and I think I know part of the answer to this question, but I'll let you give it anyways. I know that as reviewers, you guys get tons of grief. Like you were mentioning, you might get private messaged, you might get harassed. I can imagine there's potential for some mental health issues if people if they take it like personally, which as human beings, some people might. So my question, I guess, is what keeps you doing this volunteer job that seems pretty thankless at times? What kind of keeps you going and wanting to go in there and go into that Q's queue? I love that. What makes you want to go into the queue and keep on determining whether a course is accepted or approved, or tour worthy, or as well as keep scheduling that platinum tour where there are tons of complaints? I know that from my short time there.
Well, I guess it's just the mentality that I have already, and I guess people, at least the current group of reviewers, have the right mentality going into it. that we're good at not only ignoring extremely terrible things that might be said, but also really focusing in on the positive feedback we get. And as I've been trying to become more and more transparent in the Platinum forums and really respond to actual critical feedback, like I won't respond to just blatant crap, but I do respond as much as possible to critical feedback in that role. I think people become a lot more appreciative that I'm listening and that I'm making it very clear that I'm listening to them. And I try to do as possible, but also when I do get good feedback, I get a lot of positive feedback too. I don't want to say that I'm only get negative, because I don't. There are quite a few times, and there's quite a few people who will actually go out of their way to tell me, "Hey, this week's course is playing really phenomenal. It's a great setup. The conditions are perfect. You did a great job." And I do get a lot of messages like that too. So I don't want to say I'm all negative. There are definitely people in the community who are really good at building each other up in a positive form like that. But in terms of just negatives, it's really piecing together what you want to or not want to listen to. I actually used to teach for a while, and you always have students who are very negative during the time that they're your student, but they might come back and say how positive they had experiences with, or at least you can pick or piece together the idea of what the positive things you were able to do and what you're improving on, and really focus on that more than any negative comment.
And how much does the team of reviewers that you're working with help you with that as well?
A lot of positive reinforcement. I've had a lot of reviewers, especially when that YouTube video came out directly attacking me. A lot of them directly reached out to me in messages and being like, "Hey, man, that guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Don't listen to him at all. You're doing a good job." Like, there's a lot of that, and I think that's why people might see our reviewers as kind of a clique in that regard, because we're so good at kind of covering each other in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
it can kind of come off as a kind of clique kind of vibe, because all of us have kind of experienced this negativity. So all of us are really good at building each other up when we need it. It's almost like a defense mechanism to all this kind of random stuff that happens. But
Yeah, for sure.
overall, all of that negativity is very much outweighed by the amount of positive and great people that are in the TGC Tours community. And as I said, all of us might not agree. All the volunteers, there's just so many different facets. TGC Tours has so many volunteers on it, but everyone that I interact with, at least, is just so overwhelmingly positive about what they're doing, and just so passionate. And as we say, it's just very much outweighs the negatives.
Cool. Just for our listeners and viewers, the YouTube video that Q was referencing doesn't exist anymore. It lasted about a day, I think, before it got taken down because of how ridiculous it was. But just personally, Q, I want to say this on behalf of anybody who happens to agree with me. As somebody who's played multiple different levels this year on the tours, I just want to say thank you to you, to Wes. You were the two schedulers that I probably had the most interaction with, because your tours are the two that I've played the most. Just want to thank you for continuing to schedule those events and continuing to put that effort into creating the conditions and having those tournaments that allow us to play. And I also want to just give a really big thank you to all of the reviewers who allow for all these courses to be in the database. I think I've said on this podcast, I've definitely said on my own stream, if it wasn't for this tour, this site, and these courses and the designers, I would have stopped playing the game about a month or two after I got it. This is the thing that keeps me going, and then the ability that, because of all these courses coming out, the fact that it allows me then to have a stream that I do, which is fun. It's it's been a really helpful thing for me through the pandemic, through the multiple lockdowns that I've dealt with and continue to deal with. We're not locked down anymore, but we're still fully restricted where we can't go visit friends or anything. So I've found that it's been a really cool community to be a part of. And I just want to thank you for the part that you've played in that and the part you play on my stream as well. So there's some more positive for you.
No, thank you. I also want to throw it right back at you guys because when we as volunteers get stretched thin, like there's only so much spare time that we can have. What you do when you go through and you play courses for people really eases up a lot of the focus directly on reviewers because you give a lot of more feedback than a lot of us have time to do. So, and plus you being a third party, I guess, makes it very nice that it's kind of an independent opinion that isn't TGC Tours opinion either, that people can go, well, if I think TGC Tours is out to get me and you're a third party, I am more likely to listen to you than I would to someone within TGC telling me there's something wrong with my course too.
I say basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's funny you say that. So the first time that I went into the not accepted thread and I saw somebody asking for feedback and I thought I'll play it, I was actually a bit apprehensive about doing it because I was afraid that one of the top reviewers might come back and say, dude, we don't want to set a precedent that anytime anybody complains, their course is going to get played. So I thank you for letting me know that it is appreciated.
Yeah, it really is. As I said, it takes a lot of the extra time off of us because every one of us are volunteers and have really busy lives as well. I'm especially stretched thin because I decided to become a scheduler as well, while
Right.
also designing for a contest, while also reviewing. So
You don't have
there's
kids
a-
yet, do you?
no, I'm still safe. But
I know that, man.
as I said, there's only so much time I can devote out of my day
Yeah.
to volunteer, and TGC Tours is great in that a lot of the times you're allowed to go above and beyond if you want to. For instance, I really have gone above and beyond trying to get this American Open Black Salt Valley course as perfect as possible. So I hope people enjoy that too.
I can't
Yeah.
wait. Like I actually played the qualifying and actually like tried because there's part of me that wants to be in that event because I want to experience it. I mean, I know I can play it on the society and not it doesn't count, but there's also part of me that just wants to sit back and watch the carnage. It's just I think it's gonna I genuinely I mean that in a good way. I think it's gonna be fun to watch such a difficult course be played by such a range of players. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
Yeah, and it's what makes it worthwhile. These small things every week. As I said, I'm just getting better at scheduling week by week. I'm definitely the least experienced scheduler still, so there's still room to improve. But as I said, I'm getting better, and it's really lovely to see how much people seem to be enjoying Platt. And I think there has actually been a bit of a drop off in negative feedback, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean when
A
I
little bit.
when I played Plat, I mean I've every tour event I've played since November, I felt like every course was well. It was a good choice, but I come from the point of view of that's your examination paper, go play it. There's not much point complaining about it. But I haven't seen anything to complain about, to be honest, personally. It's just me.
Yeah, as you said, our previous Platt scheduler too. He's missed. He's currently not really playing the game very much, but he did such an amazing job, and I learned a lot from him directly. So it's something I'm trying to build off of what he did as well. And of course, the other schedulers as well have all been amazing and all reached out to me and helped me out with all these questions. So as I said, we're just a community of people who are really good at building each other up. And yeah, I appreciate everyone for it.
Yeah, you love to see it.
Well, Q, man, thanks a lot for stopping by and kind of giving us a little bit of insight into the TGC review process from the viewpoint of a reviewer and a scheduler, not to mention a designer that has gone through their own review process. I hope as you continue on that you receive a lot more positive feedback for what you do than the negative, because people still need to understand everybody at TGC Tours is a volunteer. There's no one getting paid for their time to review your courses and submit feedback and things like that. So I hope that you're appreciated, whether you personally and the other volunteers, whether you guys hear it or not. Is there any way that someone can reach out to you, either to give you their thanks or offer some sort of response? Can they reach out to you on Twitter or any place like that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have my Twitter tag. You can't have it be one letter, so unfortunately you can't be Q. Also, I don't want to associate with other Q-based stuff, but
right.
Zarathustra Q is my Twitter. Sorry,
it's spell it just how it sounds, pretty much.
It's like thus, but Thustra is how it's pronounced. It doesn't really matter.
We'll put a link up.
ZARATHUSTRAQ. And then I have a YouTube channel as well. That's just under my name. I'd rather not share my name directly if I could avoid it. But my tutorials on tea manipulation are available in a giant thread on the forums. There's a tip and tricks section where in the designer part of the TGC forums where someone has compiled a full list of useful tutorial videos. And I've also tried to at least do some on tea manipulation because it's my specialty. So I'd always love people to try out tea manipulation if you haven't already. It's actually pretty fun once you get used to it.
Awesome. We'll be able to link all of that in our YouTube descriptions and our podcast descriptions, so people can check out your content and drop you a line on your Twitter as well.
And then if there's anybody who doesn't use Twitter or whatever, and you have questions for Q, you can also put those in the comments, and we'll make sure that we get them to them. Or particularly if you want to give thanks as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also very active in Crazy Canucks Discord.
Right.
I try to give as much feedback in there as possible because it's a really fun group of designers in there as well. So, if I am just pretty attached to Andre, honestly. He's also such a positive guy, so I kind of vibe with him in that regard. But I'm also on the forums very regularly, so.
Yeah. Where you are allowed to have one letter.
Yes.
Awesome, man.
Awesome.
Hey, well, thanks a lot, Q. Appreciate you doing this. We'll have to have you back on at some point when we either have more questions or the complaints get to be so much we got to have you come on and answer to some of those. Especially maybe
Absolutely.
After the American Open when Platt comes back and they want your head on a platter.
I still think it's going to be mostly positive. I have this weird feeling.
I hope so.
I guess I can't think negatively in that regard. I'm just too positive about the whole thing. It's going to be a lot of fun.
If they have a complaint, just tell them to blame Ben. I mean, he designed the course.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Q.
Thanks again for having me. See you guys around.
All right. And with that, that is our episode 4 of Sounded Good. Again, thanks to Q for coming out. Thanks to everyone that sent in questions or comments that they wanted. We hope that if we didn't word your question in the exact way that you did, that you still got the essence and the answer to what you were looking for. And if this created more questions in your mind, send those to us. Either comment in the video or send us something on Twitter, and we'll be sure to do our best to answer those. Wayne, what you got?
Just what you were saying. Comment. Let us know what you think. If you have more questions, exactly as you said. I thought that was great. I thought it was great to be able to talk to Q and get a lot of that information, stuff I didn't know, and I thought I was fairly well connected. Well, shouldn't say connected I am outside, but I did think I knew more than it turns out I did. So for me, I found that very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think we all learned a little something that we might not have known, or some things that we assumed that are not quite how we assumed. So, yeah, thanks a lot. Keep listening, and we'll see you
Absolutely.
next time.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.